Hey, folks. Well, I put out a lot of content today, but I think this is the last thing that I feel I need to do. Actually, technically, this is tomorrow on April 9th, but you know what? I gotta do it. I feel the need to because once again, Justin King decided to push some LARPing stuff here. So we got it. We got to do it. I'm not even gonna play the whole thing, but I'm going to respond to what he says here. Once again, here we go. I backed up a little bit here. Once again, notice that he shaved the sides of his face. Now he's got kind of this goatee thing. Neaten that up a little bit. But, I understand. It's like, come on, bro. Okay.
With us. And in wartime, if you're not with us, well, you're against us. And that allows...
You find that it's that way in most countries, if you're not with us, you're against us. Are you going to quote George W. Bush too? Because I understand that George W. Bush is getting a lot of revisionism going on, a lot of reappraisal going on, particularly with defense against infectious diseases. He has been reappraised a lot recently. Now, I've seen a lot of shit libs who are praising George W. Bush now because of the evils of Trump. Now, of course, the same thing has been done about Nixon, but, just saying as an off topic. Let's hear more of this.
Allows us to justify things we might not normally justify, like withholding supplies, cutting off.
Yes, that is very bad. You're correct. I will give you a point for that. Well done. Yes. It isn't good to withhold supplies. Yeah. But various communities are doing it because guess what? As the Mobb Deep song goes, when worse comes to worst, my peoples come first. And so, there are Chinese folks who are buying up, there are Chinese nationals who are in this country who are buying up masks. There are Hasidic communities in New York who have done this as well. And corporations. You are correct. You are correct on this point. I'm just using that as a side point. But the truth is, yes, companies like GE are not wanting to produce masks and produce ventilators because it would go against the bottom line. You are correct. But this is something that if you really gave it some thought, I would disagree with. Go ahead.
Funding to international organizations trying to help. Because they're not with us. That nationalism.
Here we go with nationalism. What you will forget, sir, is that China is very much a nationalist nation, which has gone through much heartache over the past, 5,000 years of approximate length of time that the Chinese society or the Chinese culture has existed. And of course, I use the term Chinese loosely because, of course, you can talk about the various groups within China and everything else, because, of course, anyway, a lot to talk about. But Chinese nationalism does exist. And if you think that, this evil of nationalism is like they're promoting a different form of nationalism, but it's still nationalism. They are still providing help to Italy that helps with their public relations. They are touting themselves as the ones who, well, technically it started with us, but we are the ones that put it down first. So in the public relations sector, they are winning. Now, of course, the truth is a very fickle mistress. But that is to be seen. That is to be, to be seen later on in the years and decades to come. But let's go ahead and see his hypocrisy here, or at least my view of hypocrisy.
That nationalism isn't helpful. In the best of times, nationalism is a disease far more dangerous than what's out there right now.
That is not true at all, sir. The fact is that if we were more nationalistic, this nationalist disease, as you say it, we would not have had all the, we would not have the issues that we had in Seattle. We would have, if we were as nationalistic as you say, sir, and not controlled by capital and not controlled by corporations and free market folks who are simply worried about the bottom line and about getting money, then we would not be in this situation. We would be able to produce our own masks. We would be able to produce our own ventilators. We would even incorporate 3D printing. If we were truly nationalists, we would use doctors as more of a, dare I use this term, but more of a Kampfgruppe, a battle group, to be sent to various hot spots to where they are needed. They wouldn't just be willy-nilly, confined to their state. And of course, as we've seen, I saw something on Twitter recently, and maybe I'm mistaking this, so please correct me. But I believe there was a map that was showing, particularly California and New York, some of the hardest hit states. And I'm not sure about Washington State, but, even places like Texas where LPNs and RNs can move around the country or move around the state as needed. Even, a lot of the Midwest states, and even going into, Montana and everything else, these folks can move freely across the state to help where they are needed. They're restricted in California and in New York and other places that are touted as being, these large economies and, these great states which better represent America than, the evil red states that, only survive by the graces of the blue states. And this whole really cringy blue-red, this red-blue Crip versus blood sort of battle that goes on. So no, nationalism, if it was truly instated, we would not be in the state that we are. Look at the DPRK, sir. The DPRK shut down the country, shut everything down in terms of borders. No one can go in. Why is it that, of course, I mean, like I say, this guy is, someone who will LARP as an anarchist, but he's a journalist. He's still a writer, quote unquote.
Because it infects your mind. Causes you to take pride in things you had nothing to do with. And
it gives you a sense of identity as well. It gives you a sense of, we're all in this together. Not the fake ass sort of mentality that we have today, where people like Lady Gaga will sit there in glasses and a turtleneck and say, well, we're going to have a concert and everything like that. And if you can provide money, we can, but we're going to ask more money from, millionaires and this and that. And we have, Bernie Sanders, who allegedly is going to give his money to, support COVID-19, everything else. It's fake. And as I've said before, is that there are favorites. We play favorites. We play favorites of New York State. We play the favorites of California. No one gives a crap about the rest. We play the favorites. Oregon sends their supplies to New York because they are more vital to the idea of America. Think about that.
Hate people you've never met and did nothing to you.
They probably hate me too. So don't give me that nonsense.
I'm really glad other countries aren't using that rhetoric. You
think that other countries aren't using that type of rhetoric? You think that they're, maybe it's just not seen on a national level, but you think that there are areas of Russia that are like, hey, we don't want to deal with the Chinese. You think that there are areas of Italy they're like, hey, we don't want to deal with the Chinese, or we don't want to deal with Russia, or whatever the case may be? It's just not on a national scale. But to think that, once again, this is the whole idea where it's just more white supremacy. This kind of feeds into that whole idea of, well, it's more white supremacy that's ruining the world. And yet, white people will continue to become a minority. And you have to stretch out that idea. A black white nationalist, or a black Nazi, or, an Asian white supremacist. And you have to mix up these terms. You have to extend it out to the point that it makes no logical sense to use these terms, but you want to continue to use Whitey as the ultimate bad guy. But of course, anyway, maybe I'm off my rocker.
Because I picked up supplies today. Cases upon cases. Cases of this, one of the items. Hope it's clear. Hope you can read it. Of course, if you want to read it, you better be familiar with Italian. Italy. They're having a hard time right now. But
you don't give a damn about Italy. Don't give me that nonsense. People shit on it. The hypocrisy of people is amazing to me. While I will say is that I'm going to be very careful here and tread lightly, but I will say that people in general will be like, well, it's very awful what's going on with Italy. But of course, once things get better, then they'll say, those evil Italians who helped create fascism. I mean, I haven't heard it necessarily, but you think that idea is out there? You betcha. I mean, that's my take anyway. Go ahead.
we got gowns. The masks came from China. The goggles, Taiwan. The pressure infusers came from Mexico and Israel.
Oy vey! I'm sorry, I got it. I try not to just go straight for the wig nap, but oy vey. Israel, one of the is a country that's also been fairly hard hit. But look at, I get these, I freeze on these things, and it's like, you look at these framings. This guy looks like a nutcase. He's like, look at this. He's just staring right in the camera, trying to mean mug people. I've seen this over and over with him. He's trying to mean mug people, trying to scare them. You ain't gonna scare me. I'm just gonna say that. I'm just gonna go off on this dude for a minute. You aren't gonna scare me with your bald ass looking face, with your bald head and your shaved face. You can't even keep that fucking thing on your face looking halfway decent. Get a pair of fucking scissors and cut it and make it look halfway decent, man. You look ridiculous. If you're gonna, can't even go all the way. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Woo. Oh, Lordy. I was really getting into it there. Sorry. But this fool wants to try to shame me. Homie, you ain't going to shame me. Okay? I'm sorry. I'm going to have to, I'm really going to have to slide into a schmood here that I normally don't do on this. But, homie, you ain't going to do that to me. You ain't going to fucking shame me. All right? You ain't going to do that. I won't allow it.
The long IV tubing so the nurses don't have to go into the room each time and they can save on supplies. Brazil. We are in this.
You're not going to make a comment about Bolsonaro, huh? Okay. All right. I mean, I don't have any problem necessarily with Bolsonaro, but you're going to talk about nationalism being a fucking disease, and then you're not going to talk about Bolsonaro and everything that he's allegedly done, and, talking about Mother Rainforest that everyone was, going on and on about a few months ago? Hypocrite. Absolute hypocrite. I'm just going to say it. Go ahead.
Together. But we appear to be the only country that doesn't understand that.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, once again, Biggin, you need to do your own research. But, the thing is, there have been people like President Lukashenko of Belarus, who, at least a few, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, it's all just kind of a malaise at this point. But where he was saying basically drink vodka, go to the sauna, and that's it. So I mean, this idea that, you know, oh, we're the only country. It's like, yeah, we fucked up a lot. All right. Don't get me wrong. He's right in the fact that, yeah, this country has fucked up and we're one of the worst every man for themselves type of things. And we don't have any of the infrastructure. But the reality is, though, is that you know, instead of pointing your finger at nationalism, you need to point your finger at capitalism. You need to point your, more specifically, let me be more specific. You need to point your finger at corporations that outsource that work overseas. That's why we're having to go to India. That's why we're having to go to Taiwan. That's why we're having to go to this and that. You have to blame those companies. Blame the leadership in the 1970s and the 1980s when they said, hey, screw these unions. We're just going to work around that. We're just going to send these jobs overseas. We're going to send them to Taiwan. We're going to go ahead and set up shop in China. You know, thank you, Deng Xiaoping. We're going to set up shop, you know, in India. We're going to set up shop in, you know, Pakistan and everything else. Blame them for wanting to save a buck and to pay people, you know, literal, you know, pennies on the dollar so that they can, you know, and now we're in this situation. You know, if it was nationalism and if we had some sort of legitimate autarky, which the United States, I would say, and if I was smarter, I would say probably in the maybe the 1800, you know, maybe the late 19th century, we did have some form of autarky where, you know, we could produce our own steel, we could make our own weapons, this and that. And of course, you know, I realize, you know, once again, yeah, I understand capitalism existed back in the 19th century. I get that. But it's like, you know, there's a point where we had everything we needed and we could produce for our own. And no, I'm not gonna say anything about population control. And no, I'm not going there, just in case. I know that there's at least one person who would hear this and say, "Oh, no, I'm not gonna do that." You can have your own opinions on that. I'm not gonna get into that. What I will say though is that we had what we needed because we had the people who were able to do it, and we had, you know, people who, you know, were making enough money. And they were satisfied enough. People like Henry Ford and, you know, and Carnegie and everything else who were satisfied enough with what they had. Now, that's not me defending them. I'm just saying is that was the time, is that they weren't infected by greed to the point that, you know, our companies are in today, where, you know, companies are willing to, you know, outsource, you know, and for anything, basically, you know, for little parts. So once again, I mean, the fact that you blame nationalism is bullshit.
That thing out there, it doesn't care what color your passport is. It doesn't care what language.
So I understand his basic rhetoric. But I think when you say that nationalism is a disease, I think that China would disagree with you. I would think that, you know, the DPRK would disagree with you. I would say, you know, even Russia to a point would disagree with you, sir. Because the fact is that they have the ability to shut everything down, or at least, you know, shut down what needed to be shut down, check people, and ruthlessly control this pandemic. Now, of course, I'm not going to, like I say, once again, I know people will be slick and say, oh, well, that's him praising China. He's slobbing on it. No. I'm just saying is that this is a perception. It's also to a point the truth. Now, of course, the numbers are very, very contentious on how many have died in China, and specifically Wuhan. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not a professional. I'm not someone who's going to, pull numbers out of my ass. No. But it is contentious. And that's all I'm going to continue with. Let's hear more of this.
You speak, and it doesn't care what's on your birth certificate. We are in this together. We have to focus on the most immediate need first. Some of those places are in the United States.
The problem is that there is an underlying source. To say, oh, we're all in this together, that's nonsense. That's not true. There are priorities. Just like with just like with a medic in the field, in World War II or whatever the case may be, there's priority. When they say we're all in this together, no, they don't say that. They say priority, and this guy can be left alone. He's gone, whatever the case may be. They separated it out. They come up with their own system. That's what doctors are doing right now. So to say this whole type of shit that we're all in this together, no, that's a damn lie. No, we're not. Not true at all.
Some of them are elsewhere. Cooperation is what will get us through this.
You know what I would say to this as well? I think this is what I think he's trying to do the whole meme, because it is a meme at this point, the whole patriotism versus nationalism argument. Now, of course, a lot of lefties have abandoned both of those terms completely and said anyone who's a patriot is still a fascist. So they have thrown that out the window. So it doesn't matter if you're patriotic and you believe in your country, but you don't hate other people. You want them to come, but no. You're still a racist and a bigot, at least in some people's eyes. And I think what you're trying to do right now is you are trying to perpetuate the idea of patriotism in heavy quotes. And I don't agree with you. Once again, look at him mugging at the camera, trying to stare like he's a tough guy. I don't like being intimidated like that. I don't know about you. I don't like to be intimidated like that.
Because this thing, it does not care about your borders. It's not going to get a visa. And contrary to the branding, you can't actually lock down borders like that. And if we do succeed...
Well, the state of Texas has tried to do that very thing. And, I would say that the DPRK, and once again, as I said before, they have tried to do that as well. So, I don't know what you're talking about there, Biggin. Okay.
...seed in writing everybody else off and letting it run rampant everywhere else and controlling it here.
I would also say, too, is that, look at the United Kingdom with their idea of herd immunity, this and that. That's not to say, of course, people will say, oh, well, that's whataboutism, what you're purporting. Yeah, you're right. And it's a different scale. The United Kingdom, or England, versus the United States. I get it. But the thing is that our prime minister isn't in the hospital because he contracted the virus. There's a difference right there, but that's just me. Go ahead.
We never come off lockdown. You better get real used to staying at home and watching Netflix. Because it doesn't care about those imaginary lines. Those borders, they only exist because we say they do. This thing, it exists either way.
This is one of those... Now he's really pushing the anarchist line, the standard, this is something that even, once again, I could have really talked about Bernie Sanders today, but here's my chance, or yesterday, technically. He dropped out of the race. And of course, even he said is that open borders is a Koch brothers policy. It is a Koch brothers idea. And of course, I'd love to dab on the Bernie bros and the folks who are just so dedicated to Bernie, and now Biden is going to be the candidate, and he's a rapist, and he supported, you know, Supreme Court Justice Scalia and everything else. Oh, he's so awful. That's the choice you made. Also, we know that Bernie was a bird dog. We knew that. But anyway, Bernie Sanders said that open borders is a Koch brothers policy. And you are promoting the same thing. Now, of course, once again, Mr. Justin King here, Mr. Staring the camera with his mouth open, doesn't really care for Bernie Sanders because they didn't provide enough money for shelters. He didn't talk about shelters. And of course, he, remained a centrist about it. I mean, of course, we're going to see how his mentality is going to change. Because, of course, I think, arguably, Mr. Justin King here, Beau of the Fifth Column, came out right at the time of Trump. And he did videos on the alt-right and did more anarchist-type stuff. And now he's adapted himself to including his anarchist sort of ideas, but he doesn't say the word anarchist. He just tries to imply, he sprinkles it, if you will, like E40 does. Sprinkle me, girl. And that's what he's doing right now. He's sprinkling you with the ideas of anarchism. In reality, he's no better than, someone like the Koch brothers, I think. He still bootlicks the military. He'll, of course, talk about China LARPing as well. You notice he hasn't said that for, one iota. There's plenty of things to criticize about the United States. But guess what? As I've said before, just to make sure, this is the only country I know. This is the only country that I know. So regardless of how I feel about it, regardless of how I feel about Trump, or regardless of how I feel about the senators or the corporations or anything else, this is the only country I know. This is the only land that I know. That is the only nationalism I have. And regardless of your fetishism that you have, Mr. Justin King, is that people are always going to remind themselves of where they come from. They will always be reminded of, and they will always want a piece of that somewhere in their mind. A Chinese person or a first-generation Chinese expat will remember the old country. If they are, let's say if they are from Hong Kong or they're from the province of Guangdong, then they will try to retain their culture, and they'll still try to speak Cantonese. They will still try to watch some Chinese opera movies, or I'm not going to be too prejudiced, but maybe they'll keep up some signs that they are still proud to be Chinese. Same thing with some, Americans here today who, regardless of being considered love 56% by the rest of the world, they still try to say, I'm still German, I'm still French, I'm still Czech, I'm still whatever the case may be, Just because of, these petty little things, I'm still German. That's their idea. But, that's a whole other conversation, which I've talked about before. Basically, TLDR is that expats and, diaspora communities are cringe, regardless if they're Greek, Palestinian, Chinese, Russian, etc. Is that they are cringe. Diasporas are cringe. But anyway, let's finish this up.
Whether or not you believe in it. So sure, it's our Pearl Harbor moment.
Nah.
You want to be proud of the United States?
The thing is that the difference between Pearl Harbor and this is that, for the fact, I understand what you're getting at, sir, once again, what you were talking about at the beginning, but the thing is that there was a unanimous decision. Whereas with this government is that we had senators who sold off their shares in companies so that they could make a windfall. There were people who did deny it and everything else. There were, of course, the toilet paper meme, which has been talked about for a long time by people like Alex Jones. We had the run on firearms and everything else that's happened because of it. And yes, the United States is a laughingstock of the world. You're right. You are correct in that. But to blame nationalism is a false opinion. And it's a false idea. Nationalism is always going to exist to some degree. This idea that, hey, nationalism and tribalism, this idea that, hey, people will say, oh, well, he didn't create that. Once again, this is the whole Obama argument. We're going back in time to Obama. You didn't create that. You didn't create that business. And of course, the libs will say, well, he really meant this. And just spare me. But, this is kind of what he's getting at here.
You want to invoke that nationalism? Do something worthy of being proud of. We have had years of lackluster leadership that has damaged our reputation everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's lackluster leadership, but it's also a fact of greed as well. As I've said before already, is that there are plenty of companies who sold off shares. They outsourced these things. But leadership can only go so far. It's inherent in the system, as a lot of these ANCOMs will say, is that it's not a feature. I mean, it's not a bug. It's a feature. It's a feature of capitalism and free market economics that we want to find the cheapest way to make something as cheap as possible, and then we're going to sell it for as high a price as possible. And before is that there were unions and there were other people that weren't able to, that shipping costs were very expensive. And of course, ships sank and everything else. But since, the advent of, navigation technology, more reliable transportation for boats, the factors of, shipping containers, what we would call Connex boxes and everything else, it's made it cheaper. So leadership is one part of it, but that's not the whole story. That's only one side of the coin. You need to flip it over, and you can see the rest of it. Think about that.
And it's getting worse by the day. When this type of rhetoric comes out, when that nationalism gets invoked, we have to push back against it.
That's not necessarily a good thing to do.
They're helping us. We should probably help them too.
We can't even help ourselves. What are you talking about?
Because this is a global fight. We are all in this together. And
that is absolute shit-lib talk, and I could hear that when I turn on the TV and I turn on CBS. Why do you need to tell me the same thing that they are telling me? You're supposed to be an anarchist. You're supposed to be against the system. Why are you saying the same things? Once again, I don't get this.
Doesn't stop at the borders.
Once again, this is pushing for the, dare I say, like, I'm going to sound like Alex Jones here, but this is some one world NWO type shit where it's just like one world government. Shut the fuck up. To think that Mexico and Canada and, China and whichever country are going to do things the same way is ludicrous. It's absolute ludicrous. And it's fetishism of this idea that we can all get along. Let's all hold hands, kumbaya. Get the hell out of here. Oh, okay.
Anyway, it's just a thought.
Yeah, it really is. And you should have thought longer about it.
Stay at home. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face.
Yeah. Whatever, loser.
Y'all have a good night.
Then again, I'm the loser for still talking about this, so I should probably be the one that's holding the L to my forehead. Which I am. I'm holding it right to my forehead. Oh well. This is just absolute horse pocky. I don't care what you say. Absolute horse pocky with this guy. All right. Like I say, tomorrow I think we're going to do some Ernst Rum. We're going to continue on with chapter 11. and we are going to. I may film some of that stuff on the trail. I'm going to see if I can get my camera charged up. And I'm going to go down there. It's still kind of muddy. I'm going to see how far I can get. Actually, you know what? Maybe not, because I'm going to go ahead and flush my radiator. So I'll do that. I put it off today because I had a test, but I think I'll do it tomorrow or today, sorry. And then I will do that. So anyway, I think I'll keep it there. Bazinga. I know it's easier for me to say that. I'm sorry. I'm trapped in my own mind and trapped in my own thoughts. So you're left with me. Anyway, see you.